Guys, Zuko back with another Shadowlands video. How's everybody doing? You got your coffees? I got my coffee. Look at this. This is the other fox that we got for Christmas. It's the orange one. The other one was the silver one. But they're so good. I love these mugs. How are you doing? I'm back with another Shadowlands video here. Listen, I hope you guys are having a good Christmas break. I hope you're all staying safe, having a good time, seeing some family, stuff like that. What are we doing today? I'm going to be doing a video on Hunter. We're going to do a dungeon dynamics video for Hunter, and I'm going to run a dungeon as my survival hunter. Again, we're going to run just a +2, and I'm going to try to talk about some of the mechanics that we're going to focus on. But in these dungeon dynamics videos, I want to cover, again, 3 topics. We're going to cover um, the big major cooldowns that you have. My brain just had a fart there. What major cooldowns do you have to use? When should you be using your major cooldowns? When should you hold them? What's a good time to sort of be making sure that you're doing maximum optimal damage, if possible, when you're in a Mythic Plus environment? Again, the regular general rule of thumb is use all of your cooldowns as much as possible, but also have them up for the boss, particularly on tyrannical weeks. Like if you don't have your cooldowns up for the boss, then you're just going to be in a big trouble there. Really quickly though, I did want to say that I do have a sort of a slightly different setup here. I've switched my where I'm streaming. I've just kind of moved in a different part of the room, so I'm going to be looking over here now instead of looking. We were obviously looking the other way before, right? I think this is my good side anyway, right? What do you think? I think this is probably my good side now. So we're going to be streaming like this now. And I'm going to be looking up at you guys. I got my game right in front of me, so it shouldn't be too much of a difference there, but I am going to be, it's going to look a little bit different. But number one, we're looking at cooldowns. Um, well, when do we use them? Depends on what covenants we are. I'm going to touch on the covenant ones in a second. Then we're going to look at our utility as a hunter in particular. And I'm going to look at all hunter utility, but also some specific ones from survival hunter. And some of the most important utility that you need to be using on like a daily basis to make your dungeons go more smoothly. Remember, the point of these videos is we're talking about how do we make our dungeon experience smoother for all the people who are running dungeons with us. How can we make our team more successful? We want to just think about the entire team, not just about ourselves. What tools do I have as a hunter to make my team successful in Mythic Plus? So let's jump into it. Let's look at our cooldowns really quick, and I'm going to just cover the Covenant ones first of all. So if you're going Venthyr, you've got Flayed Shot that goes out. That's a 30-second cooldown. You're just going to use it all the time, obviously. No matter what's going on, if you're an AoE pack or a single target, fire this on the healthiest mob that's in a pack. Don't fire it on a pack on a mob that's about to die, or else you won't get the buff, right? Um, so make sure that you're launching this onto an enemy that has a decent amount of health or whatever, because each time each time the flayed shot does damage, you have a chance to get that free kill shot, right? And then if you happen to be running pouch, let's say, then excuse me, that's lots of extra damage, and it's even more emphasis on the fact that you need to be casting this on cooldown. So nothing too special here. You can cast this on every single pack. You can cast it on the pack right leading up to the boss fight. Don't worry about that. You'll have it back up again for the boss fight because it has such a low cooldown. So nothing too crazy to talk about with Venthyr. It's a very steady, smooth. You're always casting it all the time. You're losing damage if you don't cast it, so make sure it's a priority for you. If you're going Kyrian, Kyrian's a 1-minute cooldown. Resonating Arrow is a 1-minute cooldown. It's more like a 40-second cooldown in Mythic Plus if you run Mechanicos, which you're probably going to be doing. So, Resonating Arrow is great. Again, it's basically the same as Flayed Shot because it is such a low cooldown. You're just pressing it all the time, no matter what. When it comes to like overlapping the cooldown of Resonating Arrow with some of your other major cooldowns, like if you're running Survival Hunter, you got Coordinated Assault, you could probably just press this on cooldown and it will still line up with whenever you're planning on pressing Coordinated Assault. But whenever you press Coordinated Assault, or whenever you press True Shot for Marksman, or whenever you have Bestial Wrath going for BM Hunter, you need to be pressing this alongside that cooldown. Like, if you're ready with your big class cooldown, your spec cooldown, then you also need to be ready with Resonating Arrow. So don't ever have those desynced, because your damage goes, all your damage in a lot of ways is wrapped up in your major cooldowns, right? Not all of it, but a lot of it. Like Coordinated Assault makes us do 20% more damage, right, for 26 seconds. So I need to make sure that I have Resonating Arrow ready to go so that I'm getting the maximum benefit. That extra 26% also has a 30% crit chance for my Resonating Arrow, right? So really, really important to always make sure that you're, even though you want to be casting Resonating Arrow on cooldown, and you should be, always also make sure that it lines up with your major cooldown that you've got. And then we've got Wild Spirits, which is the longest cooldown for all the Hunter Covenant abilities. It's 2 minutes long, and it, of course, um, always needs to be lined up with your major cooldown. And this is the only cooldown that you probably have to coordinate a little bit with your group, depending on what's going on. If you're in really high Mythic plus keys, then you need to be communicating with your tank and with your healer and with everybody and saying, okay, I have cooldowns available. My Wild Spirits is coming off cooldown. I'm ready to go. Um, do we want to go? Do we want to blast with this? And it's important to really understand that that's what you need to do. I'm actually going to show a clip really quick of this. The clip here? Oh, that's the boss. I want to show a clip of here it is. I was doing a dungeon last night with my bros on stream. Let me just switch to this really quick for you guys. I'm going to show you the Wild Spirits. He's got the Wild Spirit Legendary in action, and it's pretty crazy. Is it not Twitch do? Do. It's this one here. There we go. We got it. So let's look at this. So this is a video. We're doing a Mist of Tyrannus Scythe plus 14. I'm healing it on my Shaman, and then one of my brothers is tanking. The other one is on the Hunter, and he's running BM Hunter with the Wild Spirits Lego. This was an opportunity for us to coordinate. So like on the last trash pack, somebody else had cooldowns and they blew all their cooldowns to get through the trash pack. On this trash pack, Quag, the hunter here, had his cooldowns ready to go. So we said, yes, we want you to blow all your blow your stuff right here. You have Beast or Wrath plus Wild Spirits. Watch how much damage he does on the details meter on the left-hand side as I play this. Inspired dude, nuke him. Watch the hunter damage. 20, 22k. Die, I'm doing stuff. 23k, 26k. I'll drop a Vesper on your head. 28k, 29. Oh, 27. He almost did. He's dead, Jim. Let me pause it right there. Look at this. He did about an average of like 28,000 damage. Okay. He did that because we were communicating, and it's so important that we were like, okay, ready? It's your turn to blow your cooldowns. Everybody else didn't do that much damage. The Elemental Shaman he did about 11, and then the DH did 9. Hero was doing 8 on the tank. He was slapping. I wasn't doing any damage because I was doing the puzzle. But this is how you need to coordinate your groups. This is a really important thing to understand. This is one of the main topics I want to talk about for Dungeon Dynamics, is that we are making sure that we coordinate our cooldowns effectively so that it's not just us all blowing all of our cooldowns at the same time, because that's so incredibly inefficient and it's really, really bad. Generally speaking, you don't need to use that much. You can just use each person's individual toolkit when you need to use them, and then it's perfect. You'll get the damage out perfectly. So that's Wild Spirits needs to be coordinated with your team, coordinated with your cooldowns to make sure that they always line up, because it is a 2-minute cooldown. So it works very well with BM Hunter. And I think True Shot's 2 minutes, right? Let's just check. I think, or is True Shot 3 minutes? I think it's 2. Let me just check real quick. Dun, dun, dun. It's also 2 minutes. So it lines up really well with the Hunter cooldowns, right? Really, really well. Coordinated Assault is 2 minutes as well. So moving on, the last covenant that we want to talk about in terms of cooldown usage, whenever using our cooldowns, we're talking about Death Chakram. It's a 45-second cooldown. I've got it right here. And obviously, you're just going to throw this all the time. The only stipulation with Death Chakram is that if you're running the legendary bag of munitions right here, which I am running, then explosive shot, you want to try and maximize your damage with the explosive shot. So if you only have one target, it can sometimes be bad. You only get one explosive shot. If there's ever an opportunity for you to get one additional target on your boss fight, let's say, try to have the cooldown ready to go for when the ads come out or when that extra target can be brought in. It will double the damage of your explosive shot, right? Because you're getting 2 targets hit. even if you bring in an ad and then you throw out your death chakram and the ad dies right next to the boss or something, the explosive shot will still go off even though the mob is dead. So as long as you tag it with your death chakram, you're good to go. So it's a kind of a minor min max. It's a min max thing in terms of damage when it comes to the explosive shot playstyle with the bag of munitions here on your death chakram. Like it's very minor, but like it's something you can think about when you're on those single target encounters. If you're going through a theater of pain, right, and there's all those bosses, all those like you go through Zav's corridor, like his wing, where it's like mini boss after mini boss after mini boss after to boss. That's when you have to try to be a little bit more creative and maybe try to get extra targets on those mini bosses. If you can't, that's okay. But also think about the Zav fight in Theater of Pain, right? If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, let me just look at it really quick. Dungeon. Theater of Pain. Zav is this guy here. He puts down that banner, right? That slows everybody, and then he sends two people down in the arena to fight each other. When he puts the banner down, that's when you should cast Death Chakram. So there is a bit of a game going on there. If you have the Explosive Shot Legendary, if you don't have the Explosive Shot Legendary, if you just have like the Wildfire Cluster Legendary, then it's fine. It doesn't really matter. But these are some very minor things that you have to think about when you're thinking about that kind of cooldown because you want to try and maximize the damage that it causes. But those are the covenants, the overview of the covenants in terms of cooldowns. You basically just want to cast them all as soon as they're off cooldown. With wild spirits, you want to coordinate a little bit. Make sure you have your big coordinated assault or true shot or beast of wrath running. Make sure that that's going. Same with the Kyrian one, but the Kyrian one is just really it's going to come back every 40 seconds. So it's kind of a tiny cooldown, and you'll probably have your major cooldown up. Anyway, so let's transition really quick. I'm going to talk about the utility of the survival hunter, and in particular, I want to start out with their mobility. They have a ton of mobility, which is exceptionally strong for a melee class, right? It's really good for a melee class because we can struggle to keep uptime on the boss. That's something that you always want to be thinking about is how can I keep uptime on the boss as a melee character? Because I'm not slinging spells. I mean, you are slinging some spells, but you're mostly meleeing the boss. It's a huge chunk of your damage. Here's the damage that I did on the last dungeon with the look. I did 6.8k overall, which is good. Like that's actually good. It's not bad. I'm in 215, 216 eye level, so Explosive Shot was my number one damage because that's just what this legendary does. 14% of my damage, but my melee is still up here. 6% of my damage is my melee. So mobility for melee characters is really important. You need to be able to stick onto the boss, right? So what do we have on Hunter? On Survival Hunter, we have Disengage with Post Haste. That's what I'm running. We'll get to Binding Shot in a minute because Binding Shot is actually essential in some dungeons. But Post Haste gives you a little bit more mobility. But let's say there's a mechanic that's going off right in front of you. There's a big circle. Maybe there's a dragon here, and he's about to do a big dragon breath. You can do your last little melee with your Raptor Strike, and then you can disengage out, and then continue hitting the boss. Hit him with kill commands, hit him with serpent stings, hit him with shrapnel bombs. Survival Hunter, 95% of your kit is ranged. The only thing that isn't ranged is your Carve and your Raptor Strike, which sure, Carve and Raptor Strike. Raptor Strike, for example, was my second highest DPS, 9% of my damage. It's a lot, don't get me wrong, but in the moments when you need to be out of melee, when you need to be obeying a mechanic, let's say, if there's some big circle that's about to kill you, like the Zav fight in the Theater of Pain, like I was just talking about, he does that big AoE green circle. You need to get the heck out of there, jump away, and then you can jump back in with Harpoon. It's so seamless. It's very easy, but even, let's say there's an extended mechanic where you have to be out of melee for a long time. You can just pop Aspect of the Eagle, and that makes your Raptor Strike ranged, and now every single part of your kit is ranged except for Carve, but that's fine. You just throw your Raptor Strikes, you throw your bombs, you throw your Serpent Sting, you throw your Death Shockum. If you're in Execute, you throw your Kill Shot, and you can always Kill Command with your pet from ranged. It's beautiful. There's so much of the Survival Hunter kit that is actually from ranged. The only thing you're not going to be getting is your auto attacks. But again, we're talking about a specific moment in a fight like a raid boss or in a dungeon where you must obey a mechanic or you're going to die and you can't stay in melee range. That's when you can just jump out with disengage and then hit the guy for a little bit of time. When the mechanic's over, you jump back in with harpoon, get back in there and get back into the fight. The mobility of Survival Hunter is very strong compared to some of the other melee specs, which just don't have the same kind of ability to do that. Like Death Knights, for example, they just have to run out and run back in and try to use some of their ranged abilities that they can, but they have a lot of melee abilities. So we are blessed on the Survival Hunter side of things, where almost everything we have is ranged, and then you can make your other you can make Raptor Strike ranged. You can go full ranged for an extended period of time if you want to. So that's important to understand. And our mobility as a result of that is huge. You can disengage over here. You can harpoon another enemy over here. You can just fire off all your, serpent stings wherever you want to go. You have access to the entire battlefield most of the time, which is really huge. Number two, I'm going to get into the utility side of things, and I want to talk about survivability first. It's kind of weak on Hunter, similar to Shaman. We have a DR, like an invincibility in Turtle, so we can soak mechanics. Remember on Shaman, we talked about using Reincarnate to soak mechanics? Not really ideal. So on Aspect of the Turtle, it's a 3-minute cooldown. You can soak mechanics. You can go immune to all damage. Just a very quick note, you have to pop Aspect of the Turtle before you get a dot on you. If you get a really nasty dot on you and then you pop Turtle, the dot will still kill you. So make sure you pop it in time. One of the reasons I love going Necrolord on Hunter is that it gives you another layer of survivability. Fleshcraft is like such a ridiculously strong ability. I think it's really good for Hunter. The other cool thing that you have for Survival Hunter in particular is I'm running Predator's Thirst, the Leech version of my pet. So I've got the Ferocity pet with Leech and Lust. Those are other tools that you can bring to your team. Lust is huge. What if you're running a team that doesn't have Lust? This is amazing, right? You can bring it as a Hunter. Back in BFA, I don't think we could do this, and I think it was still nerfed. Excuse me. So people would have to make drums, but they gave it to Hunter, and now they have it. They might have had it in BFA too. I can't quite remember. But on top of that, I'm getting 10% leech from my pet, which is actually really really huge. So, um, yeah, I like that. I actually just got this trinket too. I gotta save this survival. I think the leech portion of this is really good in terms of survivability. It does actually help out quite a bit because you do a lot of damage. So, um, you can see even in here, probably my leech was my second highest heal in this dungeon. Look at that. My fleshcraft was first. That's how good fleshcraft is. But leech was second, and then spirit bond. This is the other thing for survivability that you do get. You are called survival hunter. It's part of your mastery. So whenever your pet is active, you both regenerate 1.7% of your max health every 5 seconds. It's okay. I actually wish it was better, but it did do a decent amount of healing over the course of this dungeon. It did a little bit, so it makes you a little bit stronger. But Necrolord in general, oh my gosh, man, it's just Kevin gives you healing. The volatile solvent gives you healing, undulating, and then you have exhilaration, of course, is your regular heal. So you actually have quite a bit of tools. I think especially if you go Necrolord, you have a lot of extra tools. You have your leech. You got the Fleshcraft. You have the other heal from Exhilaration. You do have aspect of the turtle to completely save yourself, and then you have some of your other pieces of utility that can stop enemies from hurting you. So let's get into those now. Let's get into the real utility belt of Hunter in general. So just looking at the base kit, um, you do have things like Feign Death. That's more probably for like PvP in a sense. But if you come over, we have Disengage to get us out of problems, like I was saying. We have things like Tar Trap, which slows enemies whenever they walk over. It creates a big tar pit and it'll slow them. Very very good for Mythic Plus. And in the dungeon that I was showing you, the Mist Eterna side, Quag was using Tar Trap all the time because once some of the mobs get to like a certain level, like if you get up to the high dungeons, like 17, 18, they just start like killing your tank for no matter what he's trying to do. So even through mitigation. So you need to kite and you need to throw down things like tar trap to help your tank kite. That's a really, really big deal. Misdirect is an amazing piece of utility that just doesn't get talked about enough, I don't think. It's so huge. Rogue also has the tricks of the trade, right? So it misdirects all the threat that you cause to your targeted party array member, which is so incredibly good. You saw a Quag in this dungeon pulling 30k DPS. If he hadn't misdirected the tank, then they would have started attacking him. Because the tank can't make up for the amount of aggro, the amount of threat that you're generating while you pump 30k DPS. So misdirection is very, very huge. Really important to understand that you should use this as much as possible if you're planning on doing big, big bursts of damage, which most of the hunter, covenants and stuff tend to do big bursts of damage. I'm gonna look at Flare next. Flare is actually also incredibly, incredibly good. There's not a whole lot of uses for it, but there's one really big use for it right now. Give me a second. if you're doing Legion, Mythic plus Time Walking, and you're doing Vault of the Wardens, the final boss in Vault of the Wardens, let me bring it up for you. Excuse me. Down here, it's Cordana. So Cordana, this chick right here, she goes invisible at certain points in the fight. So is it deepening? Nope. Shadow step. Cordana slips into the shadows, hiding from her enemies until she's revealed. So you have to go get the light. There's like a light that you have to use in the fight. It's actually a really cool fight. And you have to essentially run over to where she's standing with the light or throw the light and have it land near where she is invisibly. And she's sending out these like boomerangs that so you can kind of have an idea of where she is, but you don't really know. Instead of doing all the nonsense with the light, you can just flare it. And I've had hunters run with me in the dungeon. They just throw a flare where they think she is, and it catches her like every time, and it completely negates this mechanic, which is like so awesome. It just saves you so much time and so much pain from having to like pick up the light and move it over there. It's really great. So remember things like that. Flare can actually be used in certain mechanics in dungeons. I can't think of a current dungeon where it's super relevant. We don't have a lot of invisibility. If you guys can think of something, let me know. But that Legion dungeon, I've done it so many times now, and if I have a hunter, it feels really good, man. Last one is Trank Shot. Wing Clip you can also use to slow people, but you might as well just throw a tar trap down because then you get an AoE slow. Trank Shot is very huge. You can get rid of an enrage and you can get rid of a magic effect. So there's not very many enrage removals in the game, and Hunter has one of them. So remember that you can get rid of enrage. That's a huge tool. There's mobs in the other side, sorry, on the ring outside of the other side. They throw those like physical boomerangs. There's these huge troll guys. They will enrage and you can trank them. You can trank at least one of them with this. Also on Mythic Plus weeks where you have the raging, when the monsters get to a certain amount of health and they enrage, you can trank those guys as well. So that's really important to know. Remember that if you have raging effects and rage effects, sorry, you can get rid of them as a hunter. Let's switch over and look. I looked at all the different specs, Marks and Beastmaster. Beastmaster doesn't really have any extra utility over the other two specs. Marksman has a little bit of extra utility with Binding Shot. Marksman gets Binding Shot for free. They get it baseline, which is really cool. Also, they have a talent. Instead of having a Binding Shot talent, they have a talent that says once the enemies are done being bound, they do less damage to you overall. Which it's only to you, it's not to the group. And generally they're going to be targeting the tank. So kind of a useless talent except for PvP. It makes sense in PvP, but it's not really good for PvE, which is what I'm focused on. So we do get Binding Shot though. This is something that all the hunters can take, and Binding Shot is incredibly strong. It's incredibly helpful. On Mythic Plus weeks that have the enrage guys raging when they get to a certain amount of health and once they all get low and they start raging, throwing down a Binding Shot is amazing. You know, all the on Spires of Ascension, all the little kitties that are invisible in Spires of Ascension. First of all, you can flare those kitties. I forgot about that. There you go. The invisible cats in Spires of Ascension, you can flare them. That's the right dungeon, right? Yeah. Then those cats put a nasty bleed on the tank and they do a lot of damage. So you can like wait for it. The tank can tank them for 5, 6, 7 seconds. Then you're like, okay, I'm throwing down a Binding Shot. You throw down a Binding Shot, the tank runs away. They all get stuck for 8 seconds. 8 seconds. That's a long time for them to be essentially stunned because they can't move anywhere. They're rooted for 8 seconds. So such a powerful ability. I can't tell you the number of uses that this has. Just don't use this on Sanguine weeks, okay? When the mobs all start dying and you bind them into the Sanguine, I'm going to come kill you, okay? So don't do that. Everybody will be very upset with you, okay? So every other affix, though, in Mythic Plus, there's so many other uses for this. The spirit guys that pop out after mobs die, what's that called again? I forget. But anyway, there's the affix where whenever a monster dies, they release like a spirit and he'll slowly start following you. You can bind those guys as well. And you can slow them with Tar Trap. All kinds of tools from the hunter to use. Besides that, um, there's Steel Trap. This is the last thing I want to talk about in terms of cooldown. So Steel Trap is essentially like Freezing Trap, except that it's a bit better. It only lasts for 20 seconds, but this is an immobilize, and the target can't move for 20 seconds unless you do more damage to them. But there's so many times when you want to use like a freezing trap, and instead you could use a steel trap if you wanted to. I've never really run it because things like Bloodseeker are just better for damage. But if you were with a very coordinated group of people, a coordinated team, and you were like, okay, I want you to freezing trap this mob, and I want you to, steel trap that other mob, and then we're gonna pull the rest of them, and then I want you to, then we're gonna have those guys bound for like at least 20 seconds, and we can nuke down this other pack really quickly. That's a strategy you could very much employ. Freezing trap is also incredibly strong. It's not really I don't use it most often for um to really like in-cap somebody for like an entire minute. I actually just use it as an interrupt. And I use it as an interrupt all the time because it's a really good interrupt. Um I'm telling you, this thing will like completely save your group if you use it correctly. There are lots of casts on enemies. Like let's think of Necrotic Wake. In the beginning of Necrotic Wake, there's those skeleton dudes that do drain soul, and they incapacitate one of your party members, right? You can throw freezing trap underneath him, and it will trigger, and then somebody will probably damage him, so he'll pop out of the freezing trap right away. But he'll be done casting his drain soul. He won't cast it anymore. It'll be it'll be all over. So like you have successfully interrupted the freeze the drain soul. There's lots of other abilities that are like that in Mythic Plus. There's mobs that have abilities that they're in the middle of casting, and if you kick them or if you stun them or if you trap them like this, it will stop them from casting that ability moving forward. So um very very important utility there. Freezing trap is huge. Steel trap is something that could be used sort of as a pseudo secondary freezing trap because it has the same effect. Um, Oh, we got in this dungeon here. That's good. We're gonna run this dungeon in a minute. And I think that's it, guys, for the actual utility, the suite of utility that I was thinking of. Oh, last one is you do have a stun. Frick, I forgot about that. You actually have a intimidation. You have a stun. All hunters have this, except I don't think Marks does because they don't have a pet, right? This is all about your pet. We're on a dark art thicket. So sorry, back here. You do have the stun from your pet, the 1 minute stun. Very good. So like the utility on the hunter, I feel like is so strong. You can really control the battlefield. Like you can run into a pack, let's say, and let's say you're taking binding shot. I actually didn't mean to take it, but I'm gonna take it just for you guys. It's not gonna matter on this +2, but anyway. You run into a pack, and there's one guy in the back corner who's casting on you, and he's not moving. You immediately just throw a freezing trap on him because he's not going to get hit by incidental AoE damage. Just throw a freezing trap on him, okay? Then there's a you're fighting like pack in front of you. There's 5 different guys. One of them starts casting a really powerful heal that's going to heal the entire group. You kick it with your normal kick. The other guy starts casting a really strong magic damage ability that's going to hit your entire group. You hit him with intimidation. You stun him. Another guy, do we have anything else left? That's a kick, that's your stun. I was trying to think of all the different things you could use. And then the tank, let's say the tank is dying, the tank is bleeding from a bunch of bleed effects on the enemies. You throw down a tar trap or you throw down a binding shot. The amount of control that one single hunter can have over the battlefield is kind of ridiculous. Honestly, it's insane. On top of that, we already mentioned the mobility. You have a harpoon to get you into a fight, excuse me. You have disengage to get you out of mechanics. Disengage also breaks you free. When you take post haste, disengage frees you from all movement impairing effects and increases your movement speed by 50%. So if you're rooted, there's lots of enemies that just cause like a general root on your character. If you are rooted, then you can break free from that right away. Think about the final boss in Necrotic Wake. He does those let me just bring it up here really quick because it's easier to just show you. Necrotic Wake, Nalthor the Rhyme Rhyme Binder. He does frozen binds, right? He does the frozen binds that will freeze you in place. You can't move. And then a couple seconds after, he's going to start casting the ice bolts from the sky that'll follow your character. And if you get hit by like 1 or 2 of them, you're dead on a high key. You will just die. I mean, if you get hit even on a low key, you'll die. So if you get hit by frozen binds and the healer they have to dispel you. Let's say they screw up the dispel, or they dispel somebody else and you haven't gotten out of the circle yet, and it hits you. You can just disengage out of that, and you'll actually be okay. So that's a use for disengage right there, for post haste right there. and it's just awesome. Like, again, more utility. Again, you could look at Steel Trap, but it'd be very difficult. Steel Trap's like hard to use if you don't have a group that's like coordinated enough to not go deal damage to the enemy that you just threw Steel Trap onto, because otherwise it'll break the trap, right? We're just waiting for a healer. All in all, the Hunter kit is really strong in terms of all the different tools that they have. There's so much utility. There's so many different ways that you can do damage on survival. There's so many different cooldowns that you have access to. All of their covenant abilities are basically low cooldown covenant abilities, except for wild spirits. But even a 2-minute cooldown isn't that bad. It's not a 3-minute, so you can get it in a little bit more often. But like it's a 30-second Venthyr one, 45 seconds for Death Chakram, and then another basically 40 seconds for the Kyrium Resounding Arrow. On a single target boss, it's going to be more like a minute. Obviously, you're not getting the Mechanicos buff that well, but um, it's just good, guys. You can really use those cooldowns liberally. Use them all the time. Use them as much as you want, and you will be rewarded for that. And that is the playstyle that they've sort of given to Hunter. There's a bunch of other classes in this game with all the covenant abilities that are all like they're all 2-minute cooldowns, or they're all 3-minute cooldowns, or they're like a variation of both. And like it's a lot. It's a lot to have to. There's a lot more planning that's required for big 3-minute cooldowns. But when you're just running a 30-second cooldown or a 45-second cooldown, you just get to use it all the time, and you get to have fun with it. I think it's nice that you can kind of turn your brain off and just cast it at will, and you'll be good to go. So that's the DPS stuff. Those are the big cooldowns. That's the utility that we talked about. We have a stun. We have an AoE root. We have a kick, as everybody else does. We have a trank shot to get rid of enrages and to get rid of magic effects, which is super cool. That's kind of like steal magic from the mage, right? We have a tar trap to AoE slow for the spiteful ads that pop out of enemies when they die, or just for ads that are putting massive bleeds on our tank. We have an ability to get lust on our pet if we want to, which also gives us 10% more leech. You've got Freezing Trap. You could spec into Steel Trap if you want to have another piece of CC. You have Misdirection, which will help your tank to grab threat when you're pumping 15 or 20 or 30k DPS like our Hunter was. And that's it, guys. You have Turtle. That's your last one I was talking. You have your big DR with Turtle, and you have Disengage to get out of almost any mechanic that you want to. There is so much here when we're talking about the nitty gritty, the little things that we don't always think about. We're not just talking about damage, we're talking about tools in your tool belt. Hunter is full of them. It is just absolutely full of tools that you can use at your disposal. And you'd be pretty silly not to use them. So I'm actually just gonna cancel this search for now because we're not getting a healer, and I'm not gonna make this video too long. So I'll do another dungeon for you guys, and I'll show you. If you want to look at the Necrolord Survival Hunter video that I did, it's up there on the YouTube channel. You can go check it out. But definitely take a look at Hunter, guys, and think about all these different mechanics and tools that you have at your disposal when you're running into a Mythic Plus dungeon. Don't just think to yourself, okay, I'm gonna do as much damage as humanly possible so that I can impress everybody, and they'll all think I'm a great hunter. Like, do your damage. Get in there, strut your stuff, sorry, do your damage. But remember that you have tools for the team. Huge tools. You can interrupt anything with Freezing Trap. You have another interrupt with Muzzle. You have another interrupt with Intimidation. Excuse me. The AoE slow, the Trank Shot, the Misdirection. You can bring Lust. You can bind everybody. So many tools that you're going to need to use for your team. And as you climb into the higher Mythic Plus, if it's your goal to climb into the higher Mythic Plus, like if you want to go get Keystone Master, right? We just got this a couple weeks ago. Let's say you want to get that 2000 rating. I got that on my Paladin. You are going to need these tools. Trust me, I've been there. I've done the dungeons. I've done these on my Paladin, and you need so many extra tools that every single class can bring, and your team will thank you when you're using them correctly. And when you communicate, hey, guys, do you want me to bring Binding Shot for this dungeon? What do you want me to do here? What's our focus? What should I be focused on when we get to this pack? Don't worry, guys. When we get to these guys and they enrage, I'm gonna hit them with Trank Shot. So don't even worry about a tank. He'll be like, oh, thanks, that's great. these are all these little tools that you can bring to make your team more successful and help you climb the ranks and get your rating way up there. If you want to get a higher rating in this in the Mythic Plus environment here, this is how you do it. It's not just about damage, it's about all the other things that you can bring on your class. So that's Dungeon Dynamics for Hunter. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.